and welcome to episode 43 of Book Writing Tips, quick tips for new and seasoned authors, and I am your host, Alba Arango. In today's episode, I want to talk about characters, but this time I'm going to get very specific and I want to talk about the importance of having character arcs. And yes, I'm going to focus on the protagonist, but certainly having a character arc for your antagonist could be a very powerful tool as well. So sit back, relax, and let's talk character arcs. Alrighty then, today's episode will be in two parts as always. In part one, I want to go over the story arc, which is a little different than the character arc, but I feel like it's still an important topic that kind of coincides with this character arc. So I definitely want to go over the story arc, which most of you are probably familiar with. But then in part two, that's going to be the meat and potatoes of this episode. That's when I'm going to get into a very specific character arc that I think a lot of newer authors aren't quite aware of. And I think it's something everyone should at least know about. So let's get down to it. Let's start with part one and the story arc. Now, back in the day when you were in high school, or maybe you're still in high school, I don't know, you learned about the story arc, and I don't remember it, but I know that my English teachers went over it. I just, it was school, it was English, I learned about it. I'm sure I diagrammed it or something. I'm sure I answered questions to it on a test or something, or maybe I missed those questions on the test, who knows? But I know we went over it once upon a time, and I'm sure you guys did in your past too. But as an author, the story arc is actually a very important thing for you to think about. And it could be even at the end, or it could be at the beginning, or it could be if you're outlining, or it could be as you're going. So let's go over the story arc just really, really fast before I get into part two and the character arc. So there are 5 main parts to the story arc. So these should hopefully sound familiar. The first one is exposition, and that's kind of like the setup, right? The setting, who's your character, who's your protagonist, who's your antagonist, blah, blah, blah. You have the part 2, which is the rising action, where things are happening to your character. Then you have the climax where, wow, it comes out to a head, and this is the climax of the story. And then you have a very important part, which is the falling action, like what happens after the climax, which is not necessarily the end and shouldn't be the end. And then you do have the resolution, which is the end. Now, I can tell you just in general that I have heard several, especially agents and a couple of publishers at conferences that critique that a lot of the manuscripts they are getting, or not a lot, I shouldn't say a lot, but some of the manuscripts they are getting are missing components of the story arc. And the biggest one they got, everyone kind of has the exposition down, right? Who it is, where things are going down, blah, 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 blah. And the rising action, absolutely. You've got, things are happening. Everyone kind of gets that. And then you do have that kind of aha moment where you have the climax that happens. But then what these agents and publishers were complaining is that a number of authors are kind of leaving out the falling action. And they're just kind of heading to the happily ever after done. And it's like, this happens, and now done. And that's not the components of a good story. So just make sure that you're covering each of these 5 components in your story so that you are going to have, not just your agents and publishers, but even if you're self-publishing, you want your readers to feel good about the story, that they have read a complete story that has covered each of these parts to a story. Now, before I get into the character arc, which is what I really want to focus on today, it's time for the crazy law / writing prompt. And if you are new to this show, every week I give you a crazy law. And this is a real law that was a law in history once upon a time. And your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to write a story based on that law. And it's just kind of a way to kind of give you a little distraction from your work in progress, maybe flex those little writing muscles a little bit more. And so here we go. Today's crazy law. In Wyoming, state law requires that women stand 5 feet away from bars when drinking in public. There you go. That was indeed a real law. Now, why it's a law, I have no idea, but that's part of the fun of this writing prompt is that you get to either make up a reason why they made that a law or use the law to create a story. There you go. Have fun with it. I love these writing prompts. Anyways, all right, part 2. And what I really want to talk about, and that is the character arc. Now, once again, I'm going to be focusing on the protagonist, but you could absolutely write a story arc for your antagonist as well and include that in the story. And I think that would even help if you, especially if you have a really good villain and you want to kind of endear them to the reader, then you may want to have a story arc for them as well. All right, one other kind of sort of caveat is I'm not really talking about a flat character arc. And let me explain that right now. If you have like a recurring series and the same character appears in all the series, then it's a little more complicated to have a story arc within every single book. Because, I mean, what are you going to do if it's, Sherlock Holmes and you've written 20 stories and, suddenly he's growing and growing and growing, or like Nancy Drew that has like 100 stories. I mean, if she has a character arc that shows growth in every story, I mean, by book 100, like she's like a demigod. So I'm talking more about if you have I'm going to talk about this again. If you have a standalone, which by the way, if you're a new author, that is probably going to be you. Because many agents and publishers are very reluctant to offer multiple book deals on a new author. So if you're a new author, then you're probably going to be querying that your book, even if in your head it's going to be a trilogy or it's going to be a 5-book series, you're going to have to start like coming to grips with the fact that your first book needs to be a standalone. Because agents may not be willing, or I shouldn't say agents, publishers may not be willing to take a chance on, books, a 5-book deal if the first book flops. So if your first book does really well, then yeah, maybe they'll be more interested in, hey, let's talk about books 2 and 3. But pitching it, most agents are going to be pitching your first book as a standalone with series potential. So if it's going to be a standalone, that means that book 1 needs to have a character arc because that's what readers and that is what your agents and publishers are looking for in the first book. Now, another caveat is if you write for small children. So if you're writing like picture books or chapter books, then you're not really going to have exactly the story arc I'm going to give you here. But if you write middle grade, which is what I write, like 9 to 12, it's like yes and no. You can have a story arc. You can have the whole hero's journey thing if you want. Or you cannot. It's up to you one way or the other what you decide to do. So if you're writing middle grade, it's kind of up to you. From what I gather, it's up to you. And I know for me, I have 2 different series. And in one series, it is a 5-book series. And I do have a story arc that goes from the beginning. My main character is a different person at the beginning of book 1 than he is at the end of book 5. But I also have a series that just goes on and on and on. So picture like Nancy Drew, except they're younger and it's just more modern. And it goes on and on. I've already published 8 of them. I'm not going to have a story arc where the story, the character grows in each of these books because again, you're going to end up with book like 20 and you got this superhero now. So if you're writing for children, it's a little bit different. But if you are writing YA and older, any adult in any genre, you're going to want to have a story arc. And what I mean by that is what readers are looking for is they want to see some kind of growth in your character. So your character starts here and then ends here. And again, even if you are planning this to be like a multi-book thing, let's say you're planning on it being a trilogy, your readers still want to see growth in your characters. So if you have a trilogy in your head, that's what it's going to be, then you're going to want to have one overriding story arc that goes from book 1 to book 3, like one big arc that goes across all 3 books. But then within each of the 3 books, you're also going to want a mini character arc. So your character is going to start in book 1. They're going to start here at the bottom, like they'll say A, and then they're going to grow to say A, B, C, D. And at the end of book 1, they're in D. So at the beginning of book 2, they're not starting in A again. They're starting with D. And then they're going to go up to, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. You get the idea. But they're growing up. And that way, when they get to the end of book 3, then your character has fulfilled the overreaching, overall, the umbrella story arc that covers all 3 books. So what is it that agents and publishers and readers are looking for If you're going to write a flat character where it's a series, again, it's a little bit different for you. If you are going to do that mode, then what you're going to need to do, think of Sherlock Holmes. There needs to be like some flaws that are in the character, like addiction is a great flaw. Sherlock Holmes struggled with it, and them coping with that addiction, right? That would be throughout the book and something that they have to deal with. So you want to have some kind of a flaw that your character is dealing with in each of these books. And that's good for if you're writing cozy mysteries and you have the same detective in each of the books. Again, there needs to be some flaw that character is constantly struggling with, something that makes your character relatable. All right, but for the rest of us that are writing books or a trilogy or one book or two books, remember, your first book is being written as a standalone, so you need a character arc in that first book. So what are the 4 main components that I'm going to give you for a character arc? And again, you can find many, many things of this online. Mine are not written in stone. These are just my suggestions of what I think are needed for a really good story arc. Usually, your character arc starts with your protagonist in believing in a lie. And let me explain to you what I mean by that. They either think they're not brave, or they are unlovable, or that they are insignificant. But there is something that they believe about themselves that is the lie. And part of this first big thing about the character flaw is you need to kind of show the reader why they believe this lie. So if it's that they're unlovable, have they been told like their whole life by their parents that they're ugly, that they're fat, that no one's ever going to love them if they keep looking this way, if they keep eating this way. They believe they're insignificant because they're being told that because they are, a woman in a man's world, they're never going to amount to anything, or that they're a farmer and they're just not worth anything. What is it that has made them at this point, at the beginning of your book? What is it in their past that has made them believe this lie? And again, you're going to be showing this throughout probably much of the book as to why they ended up feeling this way. So that's an important part that you need to think about as you are developing your book. Now, obviously, Part 2, the second component of your story arc is that things happen, right? I mean, you wouldn't have a book if things didn't happen to your protagonist. And this is, again, the rising action of the overall story arc, right? Things are happening to your character. Now, as far as a character arc goes, I will give you a little bit of advice. Slow and steady wins the race. I know you've heard that many times, but when you're talking a character arc, that is absolutely the best way to go, right? Slow and steady wins the race. You want to show growth throughout the book, not just that in, first page, you found out, the lie is that she is unlovable because she thinks she's fat. And then by the end of chapter 2, she's totally full of confidence. It doesn't feel that way anymore. Then you've got another 12 chapters to go and you've already finished your character arc. So slow and steady wins the race. Develop your character, things happen to her, and definitely don't be afraid to backslide, right? She's gone, she starts with A and then she's moved up to B and up to C and things are happening and she's doing better. Someone's taken an interest in her. She starts dating or whatever the case may be. If it was, she felt, not brave because of all the bullies, or she stands up to a bully for the first time and things went well. Don't be afraid to backslide. Like your character was doing really, really well, and then something happened and she slid all the way back down to like A or B. But this time, she's got a little bit more confidence, or she's got a little bit more support, and she jumps up to D again, and now she's moving up to E, but she's moving up the ladder. And you want slow and steady wins the race, but don't be afraid to backslide. We're human, all right? We're not perfect. We're not just constantly moving forward. Sometimes we get side railed. Sometimes, things happen that make us backslide. So you want it to be realistic, right? Your character is showing growth, and sometimes things happen that can prevent it from going further at that moment in your book, but then they overcome it and they keep going. The third component of a character arc is the aha moment, the eureka moment, or the climax of the book according to the story arc. This is when you really have your character finally really comes to grip with the fact that they are brave, or that they are lovable. They finally have that moment where they realize that the lie is just that, a lie. And then the fourth part of this is them discarding the lie. They know it's a lie. They're reacting differently to it. They're showing the confidence. They're showing the bravery. They're showing, that they are significant. And so that is an important, like how you round out the story arc is at the end, you discard the lie. It's a lie. It's not the truth. I am beautiful. I am successful. I am brave. So there you go. Those are my suggestions for the 4 components of a character arc. Please, please, please make sure that you are incorporating story arcs into your story, into your characters. This is what readers want to see. They want to see characters that are improving, that are growing, that are getting confidence, that are getting brave, that are or not even getting there, that they had that and never knew that they had that, but it is now coming out and they are owning it, because that is what you want at the end. You want a protagonist that owns their strengths and discards the lie. Well, I hope this has been kind of helpful. If you have any questions, please drop me an email, alba@albarango.com. And remember, I drop a new I drop a new episode every Wednesday. So until next week, stay safe, and I hope you all have a beautiful, beautiful week.